The Chifa Alexandra restaurant in the heart of the city was usually a place of laughter, aroma-filled air, and the clinking of glasses. Families gathered to celebrate birthdays, couples enjoyed quiet dinners, and friends came to share stories over food. On the evening of the incident, the restaurant was no different at first glance. The lights were warm, the tables were full, and waiters moved efficiently between diners, carrying plates of steaming dishes. Patrons were immersed in conversation, oblivious to the storm that was about to erupt. The atmosphere, so ordinary, would soon be shattered by an event that no one could have imagined: a brutal murder witnessed by dozens of people. The victim, identified as Marco Jimenez, was known by regulars as a friendly man with a calm demeanor. He was at the restaurant with a group of friends, celebrating a promotion at work. Witnesses recall that he laughed frequently, engaged easily with his companions, and seemed completely relaxed. Nothing about his behavior suggested that danger was approaching. Yet, lurking in the shadows was an individual whose motives were far darker than anyone could have anticipated. The assailant, later identified as Raul Moreno, had a history of disputes with Marco over a personal matter that escalated beyond control. Friends and family described Raul as temperamental, unpredictable, and capable of extreme anger, traits that would tragically manifest that night. The first signs of trouble were subtle. Observers noticed Raul sitting alone at a corner table, glancing frequently toward Marco and his friends. At first, people assumed he was merely watching the celebration or waiting for someone. But as the evening progressed, the tension between the two men became increasingly visible. Raul approached the table under the guise of friendliness, exchanging words that seemed normal at first. Those around him noted that the conversation quickly turned heated, with raised voices and sharp gestures. Patrons initially thought it was just a minor argument, something that happens in crowded restaurants from time to time. Then, in an instant, the situation escalated. Raul pulled a knife from his coat, and within seconds, the restaurant erupted into chaos. Screams filled the air as diners scrambled to escape, knocking over chairs and tables in the process. The attack was swift and merciless. Marco attempted to defend himself, but the element of surprise in Raul's aggression made resistance nearly impossible. People described the scene as a nightmare, with the normal sounds of a busy restaurant replaced by panic, shouts for help, and the unmistakable sounds of violence. The horror of the moment is compounded by the fact that it occurred in front of dozens of witnesses, each paralyzed by shock and disbelief. Restaurant staff, trained for emergencies, but not for something this extreme, rushed to intervene. Waiters shouted for Raul to stop, and some attempted to physically restrain him, but the attack happened so quickly that their efforts were tragically ineffective. Patrons called emergency services while others tried to protect themselves and their companions. The incident left a lasting impression on everyone present, many of whom described being unable to comprehend the reality of what was unfolding. It is rare for ordinary individuals to witness a violent act in such a public and contained setting, making the psychological impact on the witnesses profound. Emergency responders arrived minutes later, but by that time, the damage had been done. Marco had sustained fatal injuries, and Raul was still agitated, showing no remorse or hesitation. Police quickly secured the scene, separating witnesses and gathering statements from those who had observed the attack firsthand. The chaos that had erupted within the restaurant extended beyond the physical harm. Emotional trauma and fear spread through everyone who had been present. Some witnesses reported being unable to eat or sleep for days afterward, haunted by the images and sounds of that horrific night. Investigators delved into the backgrounds of both the victim and the assailant to understand what led to such a public and violent confrontation. Marco Jimenez, by all accounts, had been a responsible, peaceful individual with no history of violent behavior. Raul Moreno, however, had a record of disputes and aggressive tendencies that had escalated over time. Authorities discovered that the conflict between the two men had been building for months, fueled by jealousy, resentment, and a sense of personal grievance that Raul could not reconcile. The dinner at Chifa Alexandra became the tragic culmination of unresolved anger and personal vendetta. Witness testimonies played a critical role in reconstructing the events. Each account highlighted the suddenness of the attack and the intensity of Raul's aggression. Some patrons described the surreal moment when normalcy transformed into terror, emphasizing how quickly a familiar environment became a scene of chaos. Restaurant staff provided details about their attempts to intervene, the logistical challenges of managing panicked diners, and the moment when emergency responders arrived. The collective memory of the incident painted a vivid picture of fear, confusion, and the stark contrast between ordinary life and a sudden, brutal act of violence. The aftermath of the murder sent shockwaves through the local community. Chifa Alexandra, once a beloved dining spot, became associated with tragedy, its reputation forever altered. Patrons were hesitant to return, fearful of being caught in similar circumstances. Media coverage sensationalized the event, focusing on the dramatic nature of the attack while also highlighting the human stories of those who witnessed the horror. Friends and family of Marco Jimenez grappled with grief and loss, forced to confront the reality that someone they knew and trusted had been killed in a public setting. The psychological toll of witnessing such violence cannot be overstated, affecting not only direct witnesses but the wider community as well. Legal proceedings followed swiftly. Raul Moreno was apprehended at the scene and charged with murder. The case drew intense scrutiny because of the public nature of the crime, the presence of multiple witnesses, and the clear premeditation suggested by the events leading up to the attack. Courtroom testimonies revealed the depth of Raul's resentment and the escalating conflict that had culminated in murder. Experts in criminal psychology analyzed Raul's behavior, pointing to patterns of impulsive aggression, inability to control anger, and a preoccupation with perceived slights as factors contributing to the tragic outcome. The legal process sought not only justice for the victim, but also understanding of how such a violent act could unfold in a public, controlled environment. Community reactions varied from outrage to grief. Local organizations and support groups mobilized to provide counseling for witnesses and family members, recognizing the long-term psychological consequences of witnessing a murder. Patrons who had dined at the restaurant in the weeks following the incident spoke of heightened anxiety, fear of crowded spaces, and ongoing emotional distress. The Chifa Alexandra case became a reference point in discussions about public safety, the impact of personal conflicts escalating into violence, and the responsibility of establishments to prepare for emergencies, even those that seem unlikely or unprecedented. The story of the Chifa Alexandra murder also highlights the unpredictable nature of human behavior. Ordinary settings, routine activities, and familiar faces can suddenly become the backdrop for tragedy. It underscores the importance of recognizing warning signs in personal conflicts, understanding the escalation of resentment, and intervening before tensions reach a breaking point. The incident serves as a chilling reminder that even in spaces designed for comfort and community, danger can emerge unexpectedly, leaving irreversible consequences. Psychologists studying the case emphasized the role of impulse control, anger management, and the inability to reconcile personal grievances as key factors in Raul Moreno's actions. Understanding these psychological elements provides insight not only for law enforcement but for society as a whole, highlighting how personal disputes can spiral into extreme violence if left unchecked. The Chifa Alexandra case is a stark example of how ordinary disagreements, when coupled with emotional instability, can lead to outcomes no one could foresee. For the patrons who were present, the memory of that night remains vivid and haunting. Some describe the surreal experience of witnessing a life ended in an instant, the shock of seeing someone attacked in plain sight, and the instinctive fear that overtakes rational thought. The emotional and psychological impact of public violence leaves scars that are often invisible but no less real, shaping the way survivors perceive the world and their sense of safety. The murder at Chifa Alexandra restaurant is a stark reminder that danger can manifest anywhere, often where it is least expected. From laughter and celebration to screams and chaos, the night transformed a familiar space into a scene of tragedy, leaving a lasting impression on everyone who witnessed it. It challenges us to consider how personal grievances can escalate, how human behavior can defy expectation, and how ordinary moments can suddenly become extraordinary in their horror. The incident is where fear, violence, and human unpredictability intersect, leaving lessons that are both chilling and necessary for society to understand.